Did see County Board Member John Viastat is here with us. I think he's over here. Thank you for joining us. So now we have Delegate Patrick Hope here with us this evening. Thanks so much. And I was told that former State Senator Mary Margaret Whipple is here this evening. All right. Let's dig in. We're actually first going to hear from Joseph Porcelli. He's here on the screen. Joseph, I wonder if you can hear me there.
I can, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, great. All right, I'm going to put you larger on the screen in a second, but I want to give you an intro first. So Joseph Porcelli is a senior city strategist and quote-unquote professional neighbor at Nextdoor, the free and private social network for neighborhoods. So prior to joining Nextdoor, many of you are familiar with Nextdoor, Joseph worked in many professional capacities for public safety agencies, in tech firms that support them, and in volunteer capacities to improve quality of life and increase safety and resilience in communities. So we're excited this evening to also be joined by Patricia Sullivan. Patricia Sullivan joined the Washington Post in November 2001 as a technology editor, obituary writer, liaison between the newsroom and the information technology department, and for the past 4 years as a staff reporter covering Alexandria and Arlington. Previously, she was the online executive editor at the now defunct Industry Standard in San Francisco, and started one of the first online technology columns, Good Morning Silicon Valley, at the San Jose Mercury News. She previously worked as an editor and reporter for newspapers in Montana, Florida, and Illinois. Thank you for joining us this evening, Patricia. You can give her a round of applause. Yeah. We are also joined this evening by Karen Goff. Karen Goff has worked at the Arlington-based local news now since 2013. She's the founder and editor of Reston Now, where she covers all aspects of the community in which she has lived for 20 years. She's very familiar with Reston. And prior to that, she worked for AOL. We were talking about that earlier. She worked for AOL as a reporter and also worked at several daily newspapers. So thank you, Karen, for joining us this evening. And lastly, last but not least, we're joined by Jennifer K. Smith. She's the Director of Public Engagement for Arlington County. So in this new position, she's focusing on promoting public engagement, including making it easier and more convenient for constituents to connect with Arlington government. Jennifer has championed numerous engagement tools and channels to connect with Arlington constituents, to connect with all of you, including county social media program, various survey and polling tools, and the launch of Arlington's Service Request Report a Problem tool. And it's part of what we talked about last month, just the county's responsiveness. She recently launched the Engage Arlington site as well. So thanks, Jennifer, for joining us this evening. All right. So first we'll hear from Joseph, and then we'll have our other speakers come up, and I'll stay up here in case we have any technical issues. But go ahead, Joseph.
Okay. And can everyone hear me okay? Yes. Wonderful. First of all, thank you so much for having me as a guest, and for the host committee for going through the trouble to make it possible for me to participate remotely. I'm in a hotel just outside of Philadelphia. I tend to spend a lot of time on the road traveling around, so I appreciate you guys going to the length to make it possible for me to participate. I'd like to talk a little bit about Nextdoor, but also sort of the perspective I've come from as an individual and as a neighbor, and what technology has helped make possible and what I think it can help make possible. During the introduction, it was mentioned that I'm Nextdoor's professional neighbor, and that is an unofficial title, but it really talks to the essence of the work that I've been spending so much time on over the last decade and a couple of years. And for me, what that really means, and the question I've looked to ask, are two questions. One, what else can we be doing for each other as neighbors? And the second thing is, what's missing for that to happen? So I wanted to just offer those two questions to you, and those are things you can think about as I'm sharing some stories here. And I'll come back and touch on that as I talk a little bit about our work and work that I've done. For those of you who aren't familiar with Nextdoor, Nextdoor is the free and private social networking platform for neighborhoods. In Arlington, there's over 100 private Nextdoor neighborhoods. In the greater Washington, D.C. area, if you were to draw a 50-mile circumference, I believe there's over 1,000. And there's about 100,000 nationally. And neighbors use Nextdoor for all kinds of things. For example, to discover a local handyman or plumber or babysitter, In my case, I'm a new father, a babysitter, so my wife can go out on a date. Neighbors use it to buy and sell things. They also use it to communicate about things going on in their neighborhoods, from crime to new policies that may affect the neighborhood to a neighbor that may need a hand. And so Nextdoor has really become a critical lifeline for neighborhoods. And what it makes possible is it helps people who may not yet have crossed paths to connect and communicate online. And there can be a number of reasons that people haven't met. They maybe live on the opposite ends of the street. They may work different hours. They may work multiple jobs. There can be a number of reasons that they don't have that connection. But I think what's really powerful is that when you have a place where neighbors go to connect and communicate, not only can neighbors help each other out and organize a garage sale or a block party, but coming back to that first question, there are other neighbors that need things. Which brings me to sort of something else I wanted to introduce. Over the last 6 years, I've run a project called snowcrew.org, and you may have seen some TV coverage this past winter where we have an army of volunteers up and down the East Coast who will go and dig out neighbors who are elder or have a disability who are unable to shovel and who can get stuck at home during snowstorms. So if you can't get out, you can't get to the food store, you can't get to your job, you can't get to the pharmacy, and those are really important things. So neighbors who essentially may not have connections and may not be on Nextdoor have used Snowcrew to ask for help and get help from their neighbors. And it turns out that when you make it possible for someone to ask for help and a nearby neighbor to discover that a neighbor needs help and give them the means to communicate, they will help each other. And it's been a really beautiful experience seeing so many thousands of people over the last 6 years lend a hand to their neighbors in need during snowstorms. Prior to joining Nextdoor, I've been here for about 2 years. I was thinking about going and getting funding to build a team to support Snowcrew nationally, but every winter, I would drive from DC, where I lived, up to Boston, shoveling people out, tweeting, doing media interviews to spread the word. But what I found is that every single neighbor who needed help shoveling, about 99.9% of the time, was surrounded by tons of other neighbors. But they didn't know those neighbors, they didn't have a means to connect with those neighbors, and they relied on strangers because they were disconnected. And I quickly realized that while I was providing a valuable service, coordinating this with my partner who was working on the project, I was addressing the symptom of a problem but not the root cause. And so for me, Nextdoor is addressing part of the root cause, which is this disconnection between neighbors. And when neighbors know each other, they can look out for each other, right? When neighbors have a means to communicate, they can offer help. They can ask for help. They can share information. They can discuss community events. They can discuss things that are going on in their neighborhood. And Nextdoor also has a government interface, which allows folks like Jennifer, who's on the panel here, to target messages into neighborhoods, informing neighbors about things that are going on, or during a snowstorm, for example, to encourage them to dig each other out, or to shovel out fire hydrants or handicap parking spots, curb cuts, bus stops, you name it. So for me, Nextdoor provides critical infrastructure for neighbors to connect, communicate, and be of service to each other, but also for this greater discussion we're having, for neighbors to discuss things that are going on in their neighborhood, to inform each other about things that are going on, to educate each other about programs and resources that are available, and my personal area of interest, to activate each other, to take actions, change behaviors, to be of service to each other, to reduce crime, to increase resilience. And so that's some of the perspective that I bring and that I'll be speaking about more this evening. But I know we're supposed to keep it to a certain amount of time, so I'll stop here before I go on. But that is my introduction. And again, thank you for having me as a part of tonight's discussion.
Thank you, Joseph. And next we'll hear from Patricia Sullivan.
Hi. Thanks for the invitation. I've been here a couple times before, but usually with my back to the wall, back with the TV folks to cover one thing or another. So it's unusual for me to be on this end of the room. So I'll try to make it worth your while. And pardon me, I haven't done this in a while too, so I wrote down some things I want to say. I will attempt to not make it as formal as reading a speech, but you can stop me at any point and, catcall or hooch or whatever. I was a little confused by this question that the organizers gave me, so I thought, well, what does that mean? Am I supposed to speak to this from the point of view of, is digital communications better for users, consumers? Is it better for those of us who produce or create content? So I'm going to do a little bit of both, and probably succeed at neither. But the answer, of course, to this question is yes. Digital media of all types has made our lives, all of our lives, simpler, faster, easier. It has tremendous amount of benefits. I'm not only a print journalist, but I'm a real believer in the digital revolution. So much so that about 20 years ago, I threw myself into the web, taught myself HTML, learned how to upload content to servers, how to, figure out glitches in our rudimentary early web pages, and also tried to do journalism at once. This was a long time before most of the journalistic community recognized the impact that the web and digital media in general was going to have on our business. That has changed. We all recognize it now. And I love newspapers, the print newspaper, reading it on a Sunday morning, having it thrown on your front porch or driveway, or in my case, in the bushes. But I'm also a realist. And the news industry is going through a major restructuring, and has been going through this restructuring for about 10 years now. The new tools are very exciting, but they're not pulling their financial weight. They can't support those of us who work in the media at this point. And at the same time, the revenue that has traditionally supported journalism has fallen off a cliff. Our newspaper circulation in general in the U.S. has dropped from 62 million in 1990 to 43 million in 2010. And they stopped counting at that point. But I can tell you that circulation across the country has not gotten any better for newspapers. More than half of all newspaper jobs in the U.S. have disappeared in that same period since 1990. Many of my friends, excellent professionals, people who have broken stories, who have provided community service, have lost their jobs because of this restructuring. Newspapers and news organizations that have a long and proud history have gone out of business simply because of this change. That's reality. We have to adapt to that reality, no matter how disheartening it is. Now I'm told that Rupert Murdoch, who's a media magnate that I don't usually quote, once said that newspaper profits were like rivers of gold. And a few years later he said, well, rivers do dry up. And, and that's certainly true. But it's a complex story. About half of our newspaper readers, people who read the content that we put out from news organizations, read only the print edition. And this shocks me, because everyone I see is using, no matter what your age, is using the mobile web, is using, iPads, tablets, all kinds of different communication tools. But literally half of the shrunken demographic that does read news relies on print newspapers. Now, this is an older demographic. These are people who were in the mid-50s and older. So, as someone who falls into that demographic, I can say, that's great, but you don't want to build a business on people who are going to be gone in hopefully 40 years. The big but of this line of thinking, though, is that more people, and I mean a lot more people, are reading news and are interacting with news than ever before. On phones, tablets, laptops, screens of all types, in your car, in the airport, wherever there's, a screen of any kind, you'll see news on it. Speaking of us content creators, we live tweet news as it happens. We record video and we litter Facebook with our stories. We get training sessions on search engine optimization and how to write better headlines to attract more readers. We're constantly learning new communication tools. Snapchat, HipChat, Slack, Tor, Document Cloud, Videolicious, not to mention our own in-house, content management systems. I don't think I've read an AP wire in 5 years because I follow AP on Twitter, and I don't need to open up a separate AP wire, which is the lifeblood of what we do. I get alerts, sometimes too many, from local governments. I got 3 just before this meeting about Alexandria's. They're going to have a community meeting on the Zika virus. Okay, all right, I know it. But we also find news and sources from social media. We dive into databases from government, nonprofit, and commercial sources. And the key here is that we apply, at least at the Washington Post, we still apply the same journalistic standards to these new technologies as we applied to the old ones. That said, we're constantly experimenting. We have a dashboard on the bottom of our PCs at work, sort of like I think called Cryons in the TV world. They're constantly running numbers that show in real time if anyone is interacting with our stories, and if not, why not? But anyone who's ever knocked on doors in the dead of night looking for the family of an accused murderer, or any kind of person who doesn't want to be found, we thank our lucky stars for commercial phone databases. We use those constantly. And as my profession staggers through this transition, the key is what really matters is journalism. That's where you get the quality. That's where we get to the quality portion of this question. I can list all the things that go into what journalistic quality is, but I suspect that most of you know them, or you recognize them, when you come across it. I love newspapers, but I also love these new media tools, and I think that it's better for us as a community, as a world, to be able to have more voices, more competition, and more in-depth ways of, getting information that we need for our lives, for our community lives, and interact with the world. You have to bring ethics and judgment and scrutiny to these tools, but one has not been true. I believe that readers, users, the public, are much better served now by professional journalism than we've ever been in the past. And I wouldn't trade this wild and unsettled time, for any constrained or sedate past that we've lived through. So that's my pitch.
Next, we'll be joined by Karen Goff of Local News Now.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Karen Goff, and I'm here representing Local News Now, which is based here in Arlington. It was started by Scott Broadback. He runs arlnow.com, which is a really great example. It's a success story of how an online news publication is going these days. And a couple years ago, he expanded to include Reston Now, and now we have 2 sites in the district as well. So we're a work in progress, but so far so good. I just wanted to expand a little bit about what Patricia said. I used to work I spent about 20 years at newspapers, and now I write for the phone, which somebody made a joke about 10 years ago, like that's what we're all going to be doing. It's all going to be mobile, and I laughed. And really, I can see in the algorithms that I check every day that most people are reading me on their phones. So it truly is a whole new world out there. But like Patricia was saying, there's stories people who have skills still need to tell them, because if it's not, then it's just gossip, and that's something different. That's what Facebook's for. Is just people chatting and stuff. And I love Facebook, but it's different. There still has to be some standards applied, for online journalism. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do at Local News Now. We just cover. We have 1, sometimes 2 full-fledged reporters with a print or television background covering individual communities, and that's what we call hyperlocal journalism. And that's more important than ever these days because of places like, the mainstream media, like the Post or the New York Times, or I spent a long time at the Washington Times. And we used to have a big metro section. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. You have fewer and fewer people working at those newspapers. So where are you going to find out what that crane is doing, what they're building at the end of your street, or what kind of crime is going on in your neighborhood, or what's happening in the local schools? If these are things that matter to you, you're probably not going to find it in a big newspaper anymore. So businesses like Local News Now are here to tell those stories, and we're doing a pretty good job of it. And what the biggest challenge for us, though, is how to make money at it. Just like in anything in the news business, it's trying to find the right balance of how do you pay the people, how do you make money. And since this is such a new medium, it's hard to get a lot of advertisers, for instance, to change. Our biggest competition is probably the weekly local newspapers that have been coming out for years. And some people have had ads that run in those weekly newspapers, and we try and sell them ads, and they say, well, we've had this ad running for 25 years. Why are we going to change? We've converted a lot of those people to online advertisers now. And one thing we can do is we can tell exactly how many eyeballs are looking at our website on any given day, month, minute, and we can get back to them and say, well, if you advertise with us, 70,000 people came to this page this month. So, that's a lot of eyeballs where you don't have that those specifics in print journalism. So we're doing a good job of converting some of those advertisers, and then obviously the younger demographic, they're sold because they're reading us on the phone, so they understand that. So basically, our biggest challenge isn't telling the stories, because we all work very hard, and we post about 7 stories a day on our sites. So we're telling lots of stories. The challenge for us is finding a way to make this a sustainable legacy business model that will last a long time. Other organizations have tried. I worked for Patch. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. I worked for Reston Patch for 3 years when it first started, and they were trying to manage local journalism from New York City. And they put a lot of sites in places where there didn't need to be one. The Arlington one actually did pretty well because there's a lot of news here. So there did need to be Patch sites in Arlington. But I think the key to the future of hyperlocal news is putting these kinds of sites in places like Arlington and Reston, and we used to have one in Bethesda, are places where there's a lot happening and a lot going on and a lot of news. That's about all I had. Thanks.
Jennifer K. Smith with Arlington County. Thanks.
So how many of you know the other Jennifer Smith with Arlington County? Okay, a couple of you. So now you know why the K is important, right? Thank you, first of all, for having me here. I actually was lucky enough to be here last month as a visitor. So this is my second time at a Committee of 100 meeting, and it's a pleasure to see everybody again. You gave a little bit of background at the beginning, but I thought I'd share a little bit more about myself. And first of all, Joseph, I have a connection to Nextdoor.com. My neighborhood is on it. I'm on it pretty frequently. I'd say I get, I don't know, dozens of messages each day through that. And who would guess what the most popular thing is that I post? My dog is missing. I can't tell you how many times. It would be a little embarrassing, but we have a hound and she likes to go. So anyway, and it's funny, I hear a connection too. I worked at AOL before I came to the county, so I've kind of been part of this changing, shifting world for a long time. I've lived in the county about 26 years now. I've lived in all different parts of the county, but I haven't worked for the county the whole time. When I first came to the county 13 years ago, we had this thing called a fax machine. Now they're still out there, but we actually cut off our fax machine, I don't know, how many years ago? 8 years ago? 5 years ago? We started realizing, wait a minute, we don't send out press releases on the fax machine anymore. Why do we have this fax machine? Because everything was through email. So things really have changed. In the last 2 months, my daughter's school system no longer sends backpack mail. They send it electronically now. You know, that's how we are getting the information. You know, the question that was asked, is it better? Well, it is. I mean, things are as they are, so, you know, we have to adapt, right? In the county government right now, the citizen newsletter, how many people get the citizen newsletter? Yay, okay, good. It's still our #1 communication vehicle for county government news. It's a printed newsletter. And now is the time when I will introduce the new editor of the Citizen Newsletter, Peter Galkin from our office. So I've been the editor in the past. We have Peter with us tonight. He does a lot of good work in our office. It's still our #1 source of information, our residents tell us. Now that lead is shrinking a little, right? As other things are rising, our website and other things, you know, the newsletter's going down a little, but it's still our #1 vehicle, and we still have it. It's going out 4 times a year still. So speaking of other channels rising, other communication channels, we have a whole e-subscription program where we send out, you know, e-news through email. Well, that's grown significantly over the last few years. We have over 80,000 individual subscribers in Arlington to all different types of topics. We have social media channels. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we are on nextdoor.com right now. We're not posting dog stories, but we're trying that out, trying different things, because things have shifted and we've had to try to go where people are. Pat was talking a little bit about news, you know, there's some new research out from Pew, and it shows that 6 in 10 people get news through Facebook now, or through social media, with Facebook being the top place they get their news. Now, it may be articles from the Post, it may be articles from RL Now, but they're seeing it through their social media channels. I mean, that's incredible. How many people have a cell phone or a mobile phone? I bet a lot of people in this room, right? Just about everybody. Well, we know that, you know, almost 40% of people are coming to the county website through mobile channels. 40%, that's huge. They're not using computers. They're using iPhones. They're using iPads. You know, that's things are changing. And again, we've had to try to go where people are going. My husband actually is a cameraman, and you know, things really have changed. He used to tell me, wow, we'd go out with a crew of people, and he mainly covers Capitol Hill, not local news stuff, or has in the past, and he said we'd go out with 4 or 5 people. You know, we'd have me, we'd have a producer, we'd have the reporter, we'd have a lights person, you know, another person to help, you know, carry stuff around. 1 person now. 1 person. He holds the camera, he asks the questions, you know, things have changed, things are shifting. I think the challenge too for us is how do you just keep up with everything? How do you keep the skills on your staff to know how to use all the different tools? How do you know which one you should try, because it takes time to learn new things, it takes skills, you have to kind of focus your energy, and you don't want to turn away from some things that are already working to go to something different. But how do you be in so many places all at the same time? So things are shifting, but we have to shift too. So being nimble, being flexible, I think both of the speakers talked a little bit about that. Again, it's not an issue to me of are things better. I mean, I think we have good quality news out there. We need our local news channels too. I think the monetization of these news channels is really important because they need to be able to survive. Having a strong media and strong news is important. But we're all in it together, and I think we're all going to continue to shift. We don't really have a choice. But it's an exciting time, too, because there's lots of opportunities to reach people in ways we've never reached people before. Texting is a whole nother area. People get so many messages by text. How many texters are out there? How many people have gotten a text in the last, 2 hours? Yeah, it's everywhere. So again, things are shifting. I think it's exciting, and I think it's, we can see it as an opportunity, we can see it as something scary, or we can kind of grab on and, help share stories through all the different channels that are available today. So thank you for having me, and I know we're ready for Q&As. I'm the last one. I feel like I'm getting the hook. So, all right.
So we'll have our speakers join us in the front here. So if anyone has a question for our panel this evening, we'll start over here with John.
Thanks, Peter. John Weisstedt. I have two questions, actually, that are somewhat related. My first question is, in this day of the electronic media where text messages and email and so forth, there's a lot of abbreviations, everything from LOL to, TBD, whatever. And kids are now growing up learning those abbreviations and communicating in that fashion. I'm curious what our panelists feel is the writing ability and the reporting ability of young writers on the way up, and has this shorthand language compromised the elegance and flowering of the English language. If I'm being articulate, I don't know. My second question is, Pat, you mentioned that the Post tries to adhere to print journalism standards and electronic journalism standards equally. And one thing that is very apparent in our electronic media compared to our printed media is you have to give your name if you're writing a letter to the editor, to the print edition of the Post, to the Sun Gazette, to magazines. Most print organs require a name and even a location, a city or a county, whereas blogs, the electronic media, and so forth, you can use a nom de plume, you can use a pseudonym, you can use anything you want, and nobody knows who you are. And I'm just wondering how you feel about that, all of you, and whether you feel that contributes to the coarsening of civic discourse when somebody can launch something without attribution. Thank you.
I'll start. I actually have some very strong feelings about the coarsening of the language. I don't know so much that it's hampered people's writing ability, although it probably has. But the thing that makes me a little crazy is getting an inquiry from somebody who's a young professional in business. I'll get a press release that starts out with, "Hey, Karen, now, would any of you start a business correspondence with, hey, first name?" No. And I'm too young to be an old fogey, but I thought that was terrible. You should still address somebody in business correspondence as "Dear Ms. So-and-so." First name's okay too, but hey is never the way to start. So yes, I do think I wouldn't call it coarsening, but I would say casualness of language is really sort of taken over. And to your other question, Arl Now and Reston Now, one thing I forgot to mention before is one great thing about online journalism is the communication readers have with one another, about in the comment section of a story. But it's also can be a terrible thing too. You're right, because people are often hiding behind a pseudonym, and a big part of my job is monitoring those comments and making sure they're not swearing at each other, swearing at me. You would not believe what I delete in the course of a day. So, yes, discourse was a lot more civil when you did have to give your name and address.
I'll just comment on the first part, Mr. Weisstadt, about the abbreviations. I think you probably know I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old. And I won't lie, last week I looked up on the internet what one of those abbreviations was that I saw in her text message. So I worry about it all the time. She did write a very nice thank you note recently, and I felt a little heartened there. And she did okay on her English SOLs, but I worry about it every day.
Actually, I don't worry about it that much. Thank you. Maybe because I don't have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. I think that it's every generation has to have a way to annoy their parents. And if this generation's way is just to use acronyms or to use abbreviations, fine. The quality of writing that I've seen in young people is very high, actually. And maybe again, it's the crowd that I run in, because the Post is obviously going to hire people with writing ability, and my nieces and nephews are all superior human beings who know better than to show me a bad piece of writing of theirs. But I don't really have that particular concern, John. I think though you hit on a real bugbear of mine about the anonymous comments. We lost that battle in the 90s. I mean, I remember vividly when I was, back on the West Coast at the San Jose Mercury News, which was one of the first online newspapers. We had knockdown, drag-out battles about this, and we lost because the ethic at the time was that, anonymity is essential for the internet to grow. I didn't agree with it. I lost. I was the only one who didn't agree with it, but the side that I was on lost. And I look at it, and every day I say, this drives me crazy when I see people with these goofy, names who are unwilling to stand behind, who they are and what they say. I don't know what we can do about it, but I agree with you.
Joseph has a comment as well.
Sure. So, in regards to the question about, the short writing text, LOL, all that kind of stuff, I don't really have an opinion there, but I do want to offer one other concern that I have, and it's something that I've experienced personally that concerns me, is that having lived in many major cities, I really counted on local journalism and journalists to do the research to make sure the information that was being shared was accurate and had considered different perspectives. And in my own experience now, especially on Facebook, for example, where there's always a lot of information being shared, I have to remind myself to stop and think, where is this news coming from? What is this organization about, right? And there's lots of bait click and other things out there, but there isn't. It's hard if you don't choose news sources that have been have journalistic integrity when there's so many thousands of them that people are sharing all the time. So that concerns me more than the previous statement. The second point I want to make is, with anonymity on the internet, Nextdoor has actually taken a stance against that. Every single Nextdoor neighborhood is created by a member in their community, and every Nextdoor member is a verified resident of that neighborhood. The two most common ways are you can have a postcard sent to your house or verify by phone, and if your home phone or your mobile phone billing address matches, we let you into the platform. But we require our members to use their real first and last name. And that is very important to us as an organization, because we believe that who you are in your community matters, and you should represent yourself as yourself, and your neighbors should be able to trust that it is you who's speaking to your neighbors and own what it is that you say. And because of that, it's important to us that the culture of the communities our next door neighborhood networks have is something that people can trust and rely on to be accurate, to be respectful, and to be neighborhood.
Thank you. We have a question there in the back.
Hey guys, I want to talk on two issues, and I'm just going to stick with actually the second one because it's way more interesting. So digital media is by its nature somewhat self-selecting, and can you comment on whether this self-selection enables polarization, and what this effect is on the community dynamic and how informed the communities are in general on a particular issue, what things they may come to you guys as more traditional news outlets with, and is there a role with traditional news outlets moving into the digital space that you guys can play, and how do you keep in touch with people as we start to kind of get into these different niches?
Yes, the culture is fragmented, no question about it. You see it in all different ways, and the digitalization of media is part of that. I imagine it contributes to it. I'm not sure how to answer your question. I don't have a problem with keeping in touch with people. I'm inundated with people who want to keep in touch, and who want to, push forward their points of view. And that's fine for the most part because I want to hear it. I'm not getting to the point of your question, but can you try and clarify that a little bit for me?
So, so for you guys, I guess it'd be as you guys are taking in information from the community, are you noticing people, bringing up maybe issues that are becoming, quote unquote viral, versus more general opinions? And when people bring you opinions, do you find these opinions to be strongly influenced, polarized towards one side of an issue? More so as we've been moving to a more digital front.
Yeah, there's a lot more opinions out there, a lot more opinionated people out there than there were, when I started in this business in the, when I got out of college in '77. Okay, so yeah, I'm old. So I've seen the change. People who may have held their tongue in the past now don't hesitate to express themselves, and that's fine. I'm not really too concerned with that, other than the fact that our society and our culture is fracturing. I don't know what else to say.
I just think it's important as a news person to, yes, there are a lot of opinions out there, and what I heard an expert speak not too long ago who said the people who speak out the loudest in online journalism are the 1%. It's the 1% really in favor of what you're talking about and the 1% really against what you're talking about, and everybody else is somewhere in the middle, and they're not screaming in the comments or communicating with you. So I think it's really important, and just like I did when I was a newspaper reporter, to play it down the middle, to stick to the facts. And there's always going to be people screaming that I'm biased, no matter what I say, and I'm not. I'm just, reporting the news. But yeah, it didn't used to be that those people screaming that you were biased could reach you. Now they can reach me. They reach me all day and all night long.
Marie Brady. I teach a high school course, and I try to talk about news, medical news, and I try to get these high school students to bring me medical news. I don't care from which source. And every morning they're looking at me with a blank face. So yes, they're on social media, but they're not finding the news. And there's so much on the internet, even when I ask them to go and look for it, they're having a hard time finding it. So I think we're losing them. I take my Washington Post in every day, and I flip that paper in front of them, and I make them read real paper articles. But and I show them. I mean, at least somebody has at the Washington Post. They have at least edited the information, so I can choose from the articles and the topics that the Washington Post has chosen as important topics. But now these young people have so many sources. I don't think they know where to look, even when I tell them to. So can you please tell us how to help the students on this?
I would say keep telling them where to look. Tell them the difference, and this is sort of what he was talking about before, the difference between what a legitimate news source is, your Washington Post, your CNN, your even if you said medical news, WebMD, the Mayo Clinic. Teach them the difference between these are legitimate medical journal studies being reported and not, it makes me crazy. I have a lot of friends who will post on social media health news from like healthnutbasement.com, and talking about how, gluten's going to kill us all. That's not a legitimate medical news. So tell them to stay away from Health Nut Basement and, give them 5 to 10 places where they can find medical news. And, and I think a fun exercise too would be to show them the difference, between a story in the Washington Post or from the Mayo Clinic website, as opposed to something, written by some nut, who says that you can live to 100 if you chew gum for breakfast.
I don't know if this is helpful at all, but maybe having them use Snapchat to follow a medical source, right? You don't have to learn it. They just need to go and follow a medical related news source on the tools that they are using. They're not using Facebook probably. So, or Instagram, say, okay, start following a medical news site that's on Instagram. Like, what are the tools they're using? Then have them use those channels to seek what you're asking them to find. Does that make sense? I don't know. Just a little tip. No charge. Okay.
All right. We'll go to, actually, John. You.
Yes, I have a request for you. All 4 of you speakers this evening rattled off a whole bunch of websites like Instagram and whatever. Most of them I never heard of. So I have a request for you. Would you speakers please email Brian with the list you spoke about tonight? And Brian, would you please put that in an email to all of the members of the Committee of 100 so we learn about all these sites that you've been teaching us about tonight that you rattled off so fast that I can't remember. But I'd like to know about them. I'm technical enough to use them, and it would help all of us if you would send all those sites you mentioned tonight so that all of us can know about them.
Good suggestion. Will do. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Richard Lolich from the Old Dominion Citizens Association. All the speakers tonight, I think, were in agreement that the movement or evolution from the print media to digital media and social media is a plus. I would agree. However, I don't think we talked about one segment of the population that needs to be included. There's a gap. And let me give you an example. About a year ago, we decided in our association to go from passing out our newsletters and our announcements from door to door and to go just digitally. One of the reasons was cost. Second reason was we didn't have enough volunteers to do it. So we did that, but we realized that we were missing a small group of people who were not plugged in to social media or the web. And so we're still trying to deal with that. And I would just like to hear what you all have experienced, if you have, and any suggestions that you might have. So I think that's a segment of our population that we need to make sure we include.
Yeah, that's an important point. The digital divide is real, and it still exists, to a larger degree than one would expect, even in a wealthy community like Arlington and Northern Virginia. The thing is that the people who are on the other side of that digital divide who don't have the smartphones, who may not have internet access in their homes, are working on it. They are very well aware that the local community library, has internet access, or if they go to a community center, that's where they can get it. Now, I don't want to leave anybody behind. I want everyone to read our journalism, and it's still in, the print edition, but it's not all in the print edition. The best I can do is to say advocate for, getting people who, don't have that access, getting them access, because it's so important that in a few years, the leading source of news is not going to be the print media. It's going to be totally electronic, and the print media is going to follow. So.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was on mute. So I share your concern, and it's been something that I've thought about for a long time, and I've been hearing stories, actually, 2 in the last couple months, but there's a gentleman in Fairfax County who teaches his neighbors how to get on Nextdoor at the library, and I thought that was wonderful to hear. And just yesterday, I heard of a police department somewhere in the South that is holding classes for seniors to get them online. They'd like them to join Nextdoor, but they're also showing them how to join Facebook or Instagram, for example. So I think there's an opportunity, again, coming back to what else can we do for each other. For those of you who are online, you can host a class in your home or at your library to teach your neighbors who may not be online how to use a computer and how to get online. So that's something I'll offer as something for your consideration. There is also, if there's important information, I've taken note of who lives near me who I know is not online, that if something's distributed, I'll print it out, I'll go walk up to their door, and I'll say, hey neighbor, here's some information I want to make sure you saw. And that's something else that we can do. So if you imagine your street and you took a little bit of time to take note of who lives there, who might not be online, or who you want to make sure gets some information, that will be good for them day to day. But that same person may need help to be shoveled during an emergency, during a snowstorm, or may need to be checked on during a heat wave or something along those lines. So I think this presents an opportunity to think about who may need some help, who you can help, and the many different ways that that person could be served by their neighbors. And it really doesn't take too much time to walk down the street and knock on a door and hand somebody some information that may be very important to them.
Let me just mention too, I mentioned this when I was talking, we still publish the Citizen newsletter 4 times a year. We think about, what about the people who may not be connected, who want the information and need the information still, through that mechanism. Now we're reliant on the U.S. Postal Service for delivering that information. But it's still an important vehicle for us because we know it's important to a segment of the community still.
All right, and we'll get one last question in here quickly. Thank you, John.
My question is essentially a niche follow-up question from all of the ones that we've just been hearing, but I'm going to direct it to our county employee. I am certainly representative of those of a certain age, shall we say. And let's assume that I do not have a grandchild who can educate me into the new world that all of you have been talking about. Is the county thinking about either conducting a course or providing some sort of vehicle to enable those of us who would like to live in the 21st century and be able to access all of these new techniques that you're telling us about, or at least be able to reject them if we decide that we don't want to access them?
I think
Thanks.
you're a plant. I think there actually are classes. The library offers classes. I think Parks and Rec may offer some classes too. 65 plus. There actually are classes out there, and if it's helpful, I can try to rustle up some of that information, and maybe you could get it out to the membership.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. Okay. And maybe the Citizen newsletter, since the editor's here, might even, I don't know, consider running an article on this sometime. So anyway, that'd be great.
All right.
Could I also add to, my mother is 91. When she was 80, she said to me, I want to, you know, I'm seeing all this internet stuff on TV. I want to learn about it. So we bought her a computer, and I sat down with her for a couple of weekends and taught her how to use it. Now, she doesn't use it the way I use it, and she shouldn't, but it's a tool, and you can choose, once you learn the basics, which tool you need. You know, and I encourage you to do so. It's, you know, it's something that'll be help.
I got to add on there. My mother-in-law is visiting right now. She's at home. She's 83. She has an iPad that we got for her a couple of years ago. She loves that iPad. And she is alone. She lives in Lynchburg, Virginia. She is more connected now than she has been in many, many years because of that. She's learned, she asks questions, you know, she gets a few lessons here and there, but it can be powerful too.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Joseph, thank you for Skyping in. Again, I want to give a special thanks to the team from AIM for helping us set up the technology, and from Gina Broyhill and Scott Pedowitz who helped arrange this wonderful program. It's the last meeting of the 2016 program year. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure serving as your board chair. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thanks.